I think everyone is doing what they think is self-care, but in reality, oftentimes it's a form of numbing or avoidance, which is actually a trauma response, or they're applying something that worked in one season to their current season, but they have not taken into account what has changed for them. So maybe the Starbucks run and a pedicure when you were in grad school was a form of self-care. But now that you have a caseload of 20 to 22 clients you see a week, and let's say 50% of them have trauma, that's not going to do it anymore.
You didn't start your practice to barely hang on. I'll guess you started it for freedom, impact, and profit. This is Therapy for Your Money. I'm your host, Julie Harris. I'm an accountant, author of Profit First for Therapists, and CEO of Green Oak Accounting. Over the years, my team and I have partnered with hundreds of private practice owners, whether they're just getting started, scaling into thriving groups, or even preparing to sell. We've seen it all, and we know exactly what makes a practice tick financially. On Therapy for Your Money, I'll help you build a business that truly works for you. You'll get quick, actionable tips and episodes so that you can grow a profitable practice, increase your financial confidence, and pay yourself unapologetically. Because your work is way too important for you to burn out or go broke doing it. Love the podcast? Make sure to follow and give us a 5-star review. Here is Therapy for Your Money. Hello and welcome to Therapy for Your Money. Today we are talking about capacity, specifically your capacity as a business owner. And joining me today, I have author of The Capacity Code, Valarie Harris. Valarie, so nice to see you.
Yes, nice to see you too. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so glad to have you. So I'm gonna just jump right in. In the book, you say that really practice owners don't have a self-care issue, they have a capacity crisis. So I want to kind of throw that out there and let's start there. Like, tell me more. What's the difference between the two?
Okay, so, as a practice owner early on, I would notice because we have a teaching practice that there would be clinicians coming in and I would see them come in full of zeal, full of excitement, full of energy. And then over time, I just started to notice where their clinical capacity just was not the same. And they would just say, I need more self care. I need more self care. And so I would say, okay, well, what does your self care look like? And they would give me a list of all these things that they were doing. And then I started to realize, okay, but something's not working. So then we started looking at our systems and figuring out, okay, are there things that are like draining them in that way, and tried to tighten some of that. Then I started looking at myself and my own regulation and started to just realize that I think everyone is doing what they think is self-care, but in reality, oftentimes it's a form of numbing or avoidance, which is actually a trauma response, or they're applying something that worked in one season to their current season, but they have not taken into account what has changed for them. So maybe the Starbucks run and a pedicure when you were in grad school was a form of self-care. But now that you have a caseload of, 20 to 22 clients you see a week, and let's say 50% of them have trauma, that's not going to do it anymore. And
Mhm.
so then they find themselves just shutting down for a weekend, watching Netflix or wanting to take off work and go out of town, but then they come back and feel just as overwhelmed as they did. And I started to realize I don't think this is a self-care problem. I think it's a capacity issue. And I don't think that we're looking at a multidimensional way of capacity or rest in general.
Okay, so define capacity for me. What does that mean to you?
Capacity is the ability to show up fully in your life. So it's that moment that you're present, you're grounded, you're aligned. It doesn't mean it's perfect balance. So you can have a window of capacity where you're pushed a little bit to the edges, just like you can a window of tolerance in your nervous system. But when you are full of capacity, you are able moment to moment to be attuned to what's happening. So I use an example in the book of like when you're playing with your kid and playing a game with them, and you could see their nose crinkle when they smile or laugh. Like you're taking in those moments, or you can see how they solved a problem and you're like curious about it versus where you're like, oh my gosh, can they hurry up and get this game over so I can check that off the list and say I played with them today and move on to the next thing. So it's very much about an embodied presence.
Okay. Yeah, that's really, really interesting. I want to get tactical. So what would a capacity crisis look like for a group practice owner, for example?
Oh, a capacity crisis for a group practice owner. I would spot that by saying, I would say that you're going to see it a lot in the clinicians.
Hmm.
There could be potentially a lot of turnover because and turnover can happen for a lot of reasons. So I don't want to state that just because someone is having
Sure.
capacity crisis. However, if you felt like you had a strong team and you went through a pretty high level interview process, they were aligned, they were value aligned, mission aligned, and now they're kind of pulling back and jumping ship. It could be because they are losing trust in the practice owner. And so trust is built with consistency, and you need capacity to operate with some level of consistency. So when I see a group practice and there's a capacity issue with a group practice owner, I see a lot more reactivity, a lot more urgency, less pacing. You could see a number of physical illness, but now that's not always to say that. But
Okay.
I find for myself at least that, you know, and a lot of practice owners, I think you're so good at pushing through and bearing down. We're pretty high achieving and we're pretty resilient and pretty hardy in general and have a lot of grit. And so, because of that, we can push for quite a while and not even realize we're pushing or feel the push. And then all of a sudden start to have a lot of health issues. And that is a lot of what happened for me. I started to have a lot of different health issues, chronic health things were happening. That was a big eye opener for me, for starters. And then you just get away from the mission. I think that is the biggest thing is being able to sit down and go, are we on mission? Does the practice look like what I dreamed it to be? It doesn't mean it's
Mhm.
perfect, but for instance, my practice is smaller now, probably makes less revenue than it has in several years. And we are all happier, we are more at peace, we have more capacity, we're healthier, and we are providing better care than we ever have. And so when we were making the most money, our care was not as great as it is now.
Mhm.
Health of my clinicians was not as great as it is now, and my health was not as great as it is now. And so I think the alignment between your vision and mission and where you are also says a lot about whether or not there's a capacity crisis happening within the practice.
Okay. And so, what made you decide to kind of scale back to be aligned with your capacity? And I'm assuming that's your capacity, like at this stage in life, right? Because like that
Yeah.
can, yeah.
I think the motivation wasn't really initially for me. The motivation normally isn't for me first.
Okay.
It is more now in these seasons of life. I've learned to align to that. But initially, I'm very protective of people in general. And I think it was very painful for me to watch a lot of things happening at once. Like I was pouring into these clinicians. I really cared deeply for them, the work they do. And I was just watching them burning out like
Okay.
quickly. And no matter what I did, they just were burning out. And it was so hard to see and watch. Or I would watch people who started with me and they had very clear structures and they had habits and hobbies that they enjoyed and they did. And then 6 months down the road or a year down the road, like maybe they've put on some weight. They just don't look as healthy anymore. They're not doing these things they once enjoyed. And I'm going, this is not the conditions by which I want to raise clinicians up into the world. You know what I mean? Like
Mm-hmm.
they purposeful teaching practice, and and I'm seeing the strain on them. And despite us trying to do everything right, and so I just became hyper focused on capacity at every level, and taught them about capacity. I wanted to look at every system, every framework, everything we did. I would ask them, what was your capacity before you did this? What was it after? So that we could figure out how little minute things were affecting their capacity. And some of that even went down to the very population we worked with, or policies that we needed to put in place around attendance, or third party payers we worked with, systems we were connected to by proxy, but they were infiltrating our culture and squeezing our capacity.
Yeah, and in the book, you talk about just your own personal capacity and how you start your day early and then you kind of take a break, I think mid-afternoon, right? Maybe to like
Yeah.
exercise, move around, and then you can come back
Yes.
to it. And just
Uh-huh.
like how your energy ebbs and flows, or that's how I
Yeah.
interpreted it, right? Like, can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So for a solid year, the year that I left my marriage and had an emergency surgery, that put me in surgical menopause, I had no choice but to rest. Like there was no option left. Like I had no choice but to delegate. I had no choice but to keep moving forward because there were people that depended on me, but I couldn't do it in the same way I always had.
Hmm.
And that was very difficult for me. And my team was very cautious because they knew my patterns and how that could be at times. And they were very supportive, but I wanted to balance all the things. So I just started tracking everything from a data standpoint. So I had lots of different types of what I call capacity breaks. And I would test them out at different times of day. I would test out different ones and I would go, okay, did this increase capacity? Did it decrease it? And that's where I started. And I was tracking not just those things, I was tracking my heart rate
Okay.
variability, my stress level per my Garmin watch, my sleep scores, all of that to see what was impacting and what wasn't, to really start to find that ebb and flow. And then I was able to build that into training material. I call it No Trauma After Two, but it's about clinical capacity and teaching my team that so that now we have a very common language. So I even have clinicians who do the same thing. They'll do work for 4 hours, they take a break 2 hours during the middle of the day, they go to the gym, work out, have lunch, come back, and do another 4 hours of work.
Okay. Okay. That's really interesting to think about, like, not just what is the regular, regular work day, the traditional one, but like what is my own. And just full disclosure, like in the reality of business, that is challenging to also implement, right? When you have like physical space that needs to be filled and all, like there
Yeah.
are real challenges to putting this in practice, right?
Yes, there are, but I also think this has been the really interesting part for me that I think it's important for practice owners to hear. This has looked a lot different than I imagined it, but the value it has given has been tenfold. So for instance, a couple years ago, we we're open 7 days a week. So we have clinicians in the office 7 days a week. We definitely have some weekend warriors, they prefer that. We have newer clinicians at least work 1 Saturday or every other Saturday because we can fill those slots. But nonetheless, there were clients in the building 7 days a week. We had consult groups, treatment team meetings, an all staff meeting. I really like those things. I like the cohesiveness, I like that it keeps us sharp clinically, and it helps me stay aware as the clinical director of everything happening clinically since I am responsible for that. And a couple years ago, we took Fridays and moved all clients off Fridays. So unless they want to book a client, they can do that as a kind of like a makeup session. So if they need to hit their numbers, for instance, or if they had to miss an appointment earlier in the week for their own, for something they didn't expect, they can reschedule them. So it kind of gives them a buffer. But aside from that, we have our meetings every Friday, and that is their admin day. And they have a base pay, and then they have a flat rate on top of that for their clinical work. And the amount of capacity that gave the clinicians is just priceless, priceless. I wanted them to be able to work collaboratively. We do a lot of co-treating. I wanted them to be very present in those meetings and not be distracted. So things like that have been eye-opening to me because if you think about it, Julie, that entire Friday, none of our offices are being really utilized.
Yeah.
And
Like
say
there's no
for
billable hours, right? And
right, and so from a business owner standpoint, that hits you a certain
yeah,
way.
like it's a scary thing.
You're just like, "Oh, I don't know about this." but what it gives them back in their capacity, in the way that they are so tight as a team, and the way that they now jump in to help solve problems with the business. They're so committed to the mission in a way that I've never seen my team committed, to where they're like, "Hey, I wrote this blog article and I think it would be really good. Would you mind reading over it and putting it out?" And so when they come to me like that, I'm like, "Yes, I will, and I'm gonna get it out the same day because I want you to see how important that is." Whereas 3 or 4 years ago, no one wanted to write a blog article. If they did, it'd be like, "How much am I gonna get paid for that?" And
Okay.
they're so aligned to the mission and the work we do as a team that it is the return on that investment is more than I could have ever imagined, and it was a huge risk.
Yeah, that's a big risk. While we're talking about money, I want to stay in that lane because
Yeah.
obviously we talk a lot about money on the podcast. And before we started recording, you and I were chatting. Obviously, like I notice when someone is avoiding us, like it as an accountant, on a regular basis, we'll have, with the number of clients that we work with, we'll have someone ghost us for a few months and like they just don't have the capacity to deal with it sometimes. And so there's a lot of ways that avoidance can show up. But I kind of wanted to just talk through like what is the financial avoidance? Like what do you see typically?
Ooh, I see a lot of people who just don't know their numbers at all, or they only know a few numbers. So they'll know maybe the monthly revenue because, your EHR will tell you that, but they can't tell you what percentage is going into overhead.
Mhm.
Not only that, they can't break down the overhead. So, not all overhead is equal, as you know. So you've got labor cost, but then you have revenue generating, overhead. Then you have revenue supporting, and then you have those buckets of like all these extra subscriptions or things you have or things you just spend because, well, I'm a business, so I can. And they're not clear on the specifics of those things. They don't look at them, they don't track them. They may not know their per session average, dollar rate, or they know it, but they don't know how they got it. So it's
Mm,
something the EHR may be giving them, but they're not looking at how the EHR got it. So therefore, I just see them not diving deep into numbers.
yeah.
When I see avoidance, I see people looking to the numbers that feel good and avoiding the numbers they don't understand or the ones that don't feel good.
Yeah. And there are real consequences to doing that, right? We're recording this just around the tax deadline. And like true story, just last week we had a client say, like, I am just not capable of dealing with this right now. I don't have the energy. And like zero judgment, right? It is not our responsibility to judge.
Sure.
However, the IRS does not care that you have a lot of stuff going on in your life, right? Like that is not an excuse. You cannot get penalties abated because of that. So there are very real life consequences to avoiding your situation, avoiding your taxes, right? Like eventually it all catches back up to you. And so I wonder like if someone is in that space or another example is, every year or two we'll have a potential client come to us and say like, by the way, I haven't filed taxes in 6 years. Like what, can you help me? And yes, we can help them, but like there's a reason they got here, right? So like what's one thing maybe someone in that situation could do to get the ship back on the going back in the right direction?
I mean, for starters, and this is going to come across a little bit harsh for some people, and I mean it with love. I really do. Facebook groups are not your place to find financial resources. Okay. It's just not. Just
Thank you.
ah ah
So much misinformation there, so much.
the newest, hypest, trendiest, like money talk person that's getting booked here and there and everywhere. Check their credentials. Okay. Please check their credentials. A bookkeeper is not the same as a CPA. A former bookkeeper who now wants to talk to you about money and be your coach may or may not be equipped to do that. And just because 5 other people on your Facebook group use them and like them, that just because you can doesn't mean you should. I would really talk to people with a ethical, like, responsibility to give you certain information, first and foremost, and not a Facebook group. So,
And
that is
not other clinicians, like,
no,
clinicians are not equipped to give you advice, financial
especially if they
advice.
can't even link that to an article, to a
Yeah.
something IRS. You know, I'm known in our local group, and I don't know if this is good or bad, it just is what it is. The minute anybody posts something about, well, my 1099 employee, people just tag me. They're just ready for me to, like, right size that, and I'm like, "Here's the link, like, misclassification, there are real risks to that. No, I would not change that person in the middle of the year, but I'm not an accountant. However, why are you calling them an employee? Because that's a 1099, that's not an
Those are
employee."
not the same. That's not a thing.
So then I'm pushing them, like, to your resources, or I'm pushing them to someone else, Jenny's resources, like, actual people who are equipped
Licensed to, like
and with something to lose for giving poor information.
yeah.
So that would be the first thing. Stop going there. All you're doing is losing clarity, and you're losing time, and you are getting way too many inputs. And those inputs are not going to stand with you in a court of law. They're not going to file something on your behalf with the IRS. They're not your people. Like,
There's
then
sometimes
go there
just
for court and
want
just say, "I made a mistake, and I just need everybody to tell me I'm not the only one who's done this." That's a great use of those groups. You know,
yeah.
"Tell me I can get out of this. I need to know I didn't, like, totally make a huge mistake." That's a great use. I would say get out of those groups for that reason. Don't get too many inputs. And then the next thing is just, you've gotta just break it down. You've gotta systemize it. Find the leaking piece, like, whatever it is you're avoiding, find a way to engage that. You know what I mean? Start somewhere. You don't have to look at all the numbers at one day, but make a quarterly goal. You know, if it's that you're not good at itemizing the credit card things and sending them to your accountant, that was me forever and a day. I would say I was going to keep up on QuickBooks. And eventually he was like, "No, you're not, because you suck at it. You take too," and it's true, because I would think I know how to do it. So why not do it? But at the end of the day, it was taking me too long. So find a way to systemize the thing so that you're having touch points with it every single month at the same time on the same day. Put it in your calendar. Every first Tuesday of the month, that's when I'm looking at KPIs. For certain people, they may want to do it every 2 weeks. That's fine. But mine is the first of the month. That's when I'm doing profit first things. That's when you have to have a rhythm. If you
Yeah.
don't have a rhythm, you're not going to find your regulation in doing the hard thing, because you're only going to do it from a reactive place, or you're going to not do it at all.
Yeah, and when it comes to money, like, if you are not looking on a regular basis, you are missing out on tons of information that's hidden within those
Oh,
numbers too, right? So, like, it's really hard to be a strong business owner, a good steward of the money, like, make good financial decisions when you're just not looking, and it honestly, it puts your business at risk too. And if it's just you as, as a solo business owner, like, that's one thing, right? That's a choice you can make, but when you have a whole team that depends on you for
right.
their livelihood, like, that's just a risky place to be because, you and I have been around the block a few times, but like in small business, it's really not a question of if something will go wrong, it's when, right? Something is going to happen, a pandemic, a change healthcare. Like, there's just a million different things that can go wrong. Those are just two gigantic examples from the last couple of years, but something is going to come up. And if you don't have a backup plan, if there's no clarity on, what is your emergency plan if something goes wrong? Like,
Right.
then what do you do?
And even, and I'll use this example because I think this was very pertinent. We had savings in place. So even having an emergency plan, I will say, is not enough. So, like, had that. But then one of the things that we found in treating clients from the VA in a VA contract is we can't charge for those sessions if they don't show up. We just can't. I tracked very specifically. So we started tracking a KPI of what the show rate was for our clinicians that were non VA, and then what the show rate was after the VA. There was a 6% difference there. 6%. So my team, I needed them at the time to enforce and let these people know, "Hey, if you're not showing up consistently, like, we're going to send your referral back." Well, they felt a weird way about the boundaries, and they're like, they're still getting paid. So they're not seeing the big picture. So in quarterly state of the company meeting, I was able to track out and show them we are losing $25,000 a quarter on these no shows. Do you know what $100,000 back in our account could do? Do you know what that could do for benefits? What that could do for raises? All of a sudden they were like, "Oh, okay, now I get it." So
Yeah.
it's not even just the backup plan, which is the first most important thing. It's then watching these leaky buckets that add up that you don't even realize. So now we've been able to cut that down to 3% just by having them sign an agreement, and then I created a dashboard where it tracks their attendance. So if they don't
Okay.
stay at a certain if they don't stay at 85% attendance of their sessions, they get referred back or they go to same week scheduling where they have to call every week and see when we're open for them to be on the schedule. Because that was something they had been trained in the VA system that they could do, is
Okay.
not show up and still engage. And
That
if
was
they
still
don't
okay.
engage with that system, we have to find a way to not absorb that part of the system, or it's affecting our financial capacity, our emotional capacity, mental capacity. And so it's also being able to connect the numbers with the impact on the capacity of your clinicians and on the capacity of your business.
Yeah. I think that's a great place to stop for today. Obviously, there's so much more in the book. For anyone who's interested in getting their hands on a copy, what's the best place to go?
If you want to read it via Kindle, then it would be to go to Amazon for sure. And then if you are wanting the physical copy, then you can get that from my website, which is the capacitycodeunlock.com. Just put in the www dot first.
Perfect. And we will link both of those, both Amazon and your website in the show notes. So go check that out as well. Valarie, good to see you. Thank you
Yes.
so much for coming on today.
You're welcome. I would also say Instagram is a good place to follow me. It should that the handle is Valarie.L.Harris, because I do post a lot of things on capacity there. And I have a lot of links to different resources for capacity and a quiz that people can take and things like that.
Perfect. We'll link that as well. That's it for today's episode of Therapy for Your Money. Catch us on Instagram and Facebook at Therapy for Your Money Podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to Green Oak Accounting on YouTube. Until next time.
The information contained in this podcast represents the host and guest's general opinions and should not be construed as personalized accounting and tax advice. Listeners should consider all facts and circumstances before applying this information and seek appropriate advice from an accountant, financial planner, lawyer, or other professional. Any info provided does not constitute accounting, tax, or legal advice.